reception tonight. I will let speak our executive director first, and then we will start with our program. Mike, please.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you so much. Hi, well, everybody. Welcome. So glad you're all here. I'm Mike Walbacher, as Tina mentioned, the executive director of the Schuylkill Center. So happy to welcome you tonight to an overdue celebration of Earth Day and our new show, Ecotactical, a show long in the coming. So it's so great that it's there. And I'm going to share my screen with you and show you just a few things that are happening at the Schuylkill Center. Some of you may be new to the Schuylkill Center. So we're here for the show tonight. This is part of our Thursday night series, Thursday Night Live. So every Thursday at 7 o'clock until deep into November, we'll be doing these. Next week is a nature trivia night. The week after that, we're getting a virtual tour of our wildlife clinic. So all of these will be on our website, schuylkillcenter.org, as you probably know and have found to get here tonight. So I'd love for you to come back to some of the other programming that we're doing virtually, including Thursday Night Live. In addition, we're so happy to announce that we're open. Actually, our trails have always been open, and lots of people have discovered. We've got 340 acres in Upper Roxborough, about 4 miles of trails. And so many studies have shown that seeing green, seeing leaves, breathing the chemicals given off by trees have all these health benefits. So if you're stressed out by these days, whether it's the pandemic or the election or the economy, go for a walk in our forest, breathe the pine forest. Our pine grove is in one section, and the chemical pinene in pine trees will calm you instantly. So go get some natural calming, go sit outdoors, or come for a walk on our trail. So our trails are open, but the visitor center opened on September 8th. So now you can actually come into our building, and that's the great part. We can actually see the show that's available tonight. We do a lot of programming across the organization. So we run Nature Preschool, the first nature-based preschool in the state of Pennsylvania. And our kids are outside every day, 3, 4, 5-year-olds outside all day. And it's become especially so this year. So our kids are doing in-person classes, and the little kids are wearing masks most of the day, as 4-year-olds can, but they're outside, which is really great. But we do a wide range of other environmental education programming. The bread and butter of our organization since the mid-1960s, when we were founded, is giving field trips, science-based field trips to schools across the region, especially schools in the city of Philadelphia. So we've been doing that since 1965. This is the first fall we're actually not receiving field trips from other schools, which is crazy weird for us not to be doing this, but we do have virtual versions of our field trips that we are sharing with schools. Admittedly, Zoom is not the same as a walk in a forest or dipping into a pond, but nonetheless, it's what we can do right now. So we do have a huge slate of environmental education programming that we offer the public, and actually we're beginning to offer face-to-face programming. So in October, when you come back to our calendar, you'll soon see that you can do a volunteer work session in our forest and help us restore the property. And at the end of October, we'll be doing some health and wellness walks as well into November. So we're going to try some modest programming live. So that's all coming up. It's all on our website. We also offer the only wildlife clinic in the city of Philadelphia, one of the few in the region. So we help thousands of injured, orphaned, sick animals, including this red-tailed hawk, who's one of about 150 different species of critters that have come to the clinic. Everything from tiny hummingbirds. Tiny hummingbirds, unfortunately, stuck on the duct tape that people now wrap around trees for lanternflies. Please don't do that. And to massive snapping turtles that have come in because they've been hit by cars. So the clinic does life-saving work. It's a really remarkable thing. And of course, the environmental art program, as you all know, or as you'll learn more about today. So it's the most ambitious environmental art program of a nature center in the United States. It's really a remarkable thing. Now in its 20th year, celebrating our 20th anniversary. And we do have lots of volunteer sessions, as I mentioned, where you can help us plant trees, help me and the Fanatic. This is another Earth Day. This is what Earth Day might have been if we were allowed to do it, but this is Earth Day in 2019, We're also a member-based organization, and your membership supports things like the programming that we do and our art program. So if you are a member, thank you so much. If you're not a member, we would love your membership. We also were smacked by this derecho on June 3rd. Derecho is kind of a new kind of storm that climate change is giving us a new vocabulary. A derecho, for me, the best description I heard was a sideways tornado, kind of a rolling straight on tornado. And it descended on our, well, it actually went from Reading to the Jersey Shore. But it passed over our pine grove and took out a huge chunk of the pine trees I mentioned earlier that are so healing for us. The pine grove happily is much bigger than this, but this is one section that was hit hard. There's a fund on our website to help us restore pine grove, which we're asking our friends to consider adopting as a cause. So again, Thursday Night Live happening every Thursday, next week, Nature Trivia Night, and we hope that you'll participate in that. We're so thankful you're all here. I'm also thankful to introduce to you Tina Plokars, who's the new director of our environmental art program. So she's only been with us for the month of September. So this is the first show that she's worked on. She'll also introduce other people involved, but I also just want to personally thank Liz, who set up the slides you were just watching, but she also installed the show and she worked closely with the artists. And of course, she'll mention Christina Catanese, who directed the art program for the 6 years preceding this. And I want to thank Christina for all the great work that she's done with us over 6 years. And I'm so thankful that she's here tonight, zooming in from Michigan, her new home. So thank you, Christina. Thank you to Liz. And Tina, welcome. So glad you're doing this tonight. Oh, and thank you to all the artists. Really appreciate your participation.
Thank you, Mike, for the wonderful introduction. And also from me, like a very warm welcome to this evening. I'm really glad that everybody is here and could join us tonight. As Mike said, like my name is Tina Plokars. I'm the new director for environmental art at the Schuylkill Center for Environmental Education. And what you have just heard while you were also watching our images from the exhibition were music, especially from the 1970s. And from especially Earth Day celebrated 1970s in Philadelphia is where, what's her name, Shelley Eaton was playing her song Air. She was one of the lead singers from the band Hair. And you also heard a song, classics from Marvin Gaye and like Mercy, Mercy Me, and the ecology was a lot of times people don't know and has to do with Earth Day. So, but before we begin our program, I would like to do a little bit of housekeeping. And the housekeeping, the first information I would like to share and ask you, we would like to record this evening, our virtual reception for other people to watch afterwards on our YouTube account. And if there's anybody who has now objections and doesn't want to be recorded or doesn't want to have this recorded, please speak up now in our chat so that we can like stop the recording. If there are no objections, I would like just move on and tell you a little bit what we will do tonight. So we will start off with a short introduction by our former director, Christina Catanese. A lot of you might know. And Liz Jalsamine, they both together organized the show with the artist and really kept on doing and kept on going over the last 6 months while the show couldn't open in April. So I'm really thankful for both of them to like speak today and like tell us a little bit how this show came together. Afterwards, we will have short presentations by the artist with images from the artist showing us or telling us exactly what they were doing in the show and telling us a little bit more about their practice. I would like you all to participate in that conversation through our chat. We are open our chat, and we have asked you also through our ISVP link to like give us questions you might have for the askers. So please speak up if you have any questions for the artist. We will have after the presentations a short Q&A where we can directly ask the artist or more generally, or even to the art team if you want. So the show we are opening tonight is Ecotactical, Earth Day at 50, and it offers a look into Earth Day's legacy, its activism, and its practices over the last 50 years. The show is one part of our Schuylkill, of the Schuylkill Center's art program, which really focuses on environmental problems and issues practices today. We were founded 20 years ago, and we are offering today a program of gallery exhibitions, artist in residency programs, as well as permanent and temporary exhibitions on our property and on our trails. But now I'd like to hand over to Christina Catanese to tell us a little bit more how this show came together. Christina.
Thank you so much, Tina, and happy belated Earth Day, everybody. I don't think they sell cards for that, but nonetheless, we're still celebrating. It's still the 50th anniversary year. And thank you so much to Tina and the team for having me back again. And a warm welcome to Tina. I'm just so excited for this new era of environmental art under your leadership, and just have so much respect for Tina as a curator and colleague, and can't wait to see how the program grows and changes under with her as the director. So welcome. So yeah, this show has been in the works for quite a while. I've been sort of noodling about it for several years. When I noticed when the anniversary was going to be, across the world, people in the environmental world were trying to mark this anniversary before the pandemic had other plans for us. Including us and the wonderful artists that have been so patient and nimble throughout the extended planning process. But even though we missed the Earth Day milestone itself, it was really clear to us that we still needed to do this show because as the world continued to change and evolve so quickly, it really felt to me like it only underscored the relevance and significance of what the artists were reflecting on. So things like incorporating grief and memorial into Earth Day became super present for us all. Lots of the artists have an activism focus, which of course with the most recent round of popular uprisings against police violence against Black people, there's unprecedented activism going on in our country today. And even before all of this, there was so much energy around building around the climate crisis, especially with youth activists. So just with everything that's happening, I feel like this show got more relevant to do, not less. And it was important that we were, I think, reflecting on the legacy of Earth Day and how artists played a role in the early days of Earth Day, but not, with this show, we're not only looking back at what was, but also what Earth Day could mean to us now and what we need from this holiday now. And the artists in the show are really helping us imagine and challenging us to consider what Earth Day could mean beyond what it has come to mean to us. And yeah, I think thinking back to the 60s and 70s, it feels like a very different time now. It feels like we've made a lot of progress environmentally if we consider that the EPA didn't even exist when Earth Day first was celebrated. But also there are ways in which we haven't made that much progress. Like we knew about climate change back then, and there hasn't been a ton of action taken. So there's lots of ways that the past still feels really present, and these artists are pointing the way to the future. So I think that's what I have to share for you for now, and just another thank you to Liz for especially bringing this home with working with the artists, and thank you to all of the artists who are contributing their work to this show.
Great, thanks, Christina. Hi, my name's Liz. I'm exhibitions coordinator at the Schuylkill Center. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm glad we're finally able to present this exhibition in the gallery. It felt really good to be back on site at a safe distance, being able to meet the artists, seeing the work in person. And as you'll see, we have a lot of great work in the gallery, but also out on our trails, which offers for a great opportunity to get outside during this time. And And yeah, I'm really interested in all of the relations to like the situations that we're in right now with COVID and how that relates to the meaning of the show now. And yeah, I'm gonna get started with the artist talk so we can hear more about the work and from the artists. So here are some pictures of the gallery. And we're gonna go ahead and get started with Nicole Donnelly.
Hi.
So
Thank you very much. So I guess, thank you very much for organizing this exhibition, and it's really such a pleasure to be taking part in it. I certainly think of myself as an environmentalist and as an environmental artist, and how I work with the environment is really through collecting plant material, because I am also a paper maker. And in the past few years, since 2016, I've come fairly regularly to the Schuylkill Center about once a year to collect invasive plants, meaning non-native aggressive growers that crowd out native plants. So the series that we're looking at and that's on display at the Schuylkill Center are all made using Oriental bittersweet vines, which really climb all over some of the tallest trees. And, you know, even a huge bag full of these vines barely makes a dent in what is actually growing there. So through my actions, I make a small impact, small positive impact on the environment, because as an artist, as a person who makes objects and puts more things into the world, I'm always very concerned about conserving the natural world as I use its materials. And I made a series of 5 sculptures that are along the habitat loop, which is what we are looking at now. These are called Bittersweet Shields. They use handmade paper and the invasive bittersweet vines and mulberry branches. So it's paper, glue, and branches. There are no other materials used in this at all. There's no preservation, no sort of preservative coating that's going to make them more waterproof than they are. And so they will be relatively short-lived, but they have stood up through 2 nor'easters in the past. So it's actually a very strong paper. You can see that darker brown paper is actually the pulp of the bittersweet vines, and some pigmented pulp on top of that. So these are using traditional, I guess, shield imagery, which really, if you begin to look at it, it's a lot of teeth or arrowheads. But the shield is also a very interesting object to me, because we think of it as being protection, but it is also defense. And it's not necessarily non-aggressive. So the shield is still an object for battle. It's there to protect, but it's still an aggressive symbol. And so I think of that, it sort of mirrors the presence of invasive plants within our environment and how they behave, because on the one hand, some of them are very beautiful, they're very ornamental, they add variety to what we have around us, but they can also be a very aggressive presence. And we may not perceive them that way immediately, but they can become that way. So those are my pieces.
Great, thanks so much, Nicole. Next we have Ants on a Log.
Okay, hi, I'm Anya, and my other half is Julie, who will speak soon. So we have a series of, well, we play music for children. That's a picture of just one of our standard children's shows. And we wrote a musical called Curious, Think Outside the Pipeline. And it is about 2 siblings who fight against the expansion of an oil refinery in their town. And so while while we realized, we knew we wanted to write a musical, and we were looking for topics, and we found a story right in Philadelphia about the refinery and this part of town that was really forming a community powerhouse to fight it. So the musical was loosely based on that, and actually it has a lot of connections to the work that this organization called Philly Thrive is doing. So it's loosely based on that. We have some objects from the musical. So when we had people come to see it, we had them sign this call for clean energy, no to fossil fuels sign, and various like environmental activism actions when people came. I also want to post this link here to, hold on 1 second.
I got you.
You got me. Okay. Thanks, Julie. So that's actually, we didn't really know how big the Philly Thrive story was going to be or how successful it was going to be. So the organization actually, we wrote the musical in 2016, right before the election, and before we knew the results of the election. And we didn't realize how big Philly Thrive was going to get and how much success they were going to have. So we were sort of like, we had to amend the end of the musical. Anyway, so there are some artifacts from our show in the Schuylkill show here. And I'm going to let Julie take it from here.
All right, so yeah, the poster you're looking at right now is a bunch of signatures from audience members who are signing on, committing to fighting for clean air, and it gives kids a way to take what they learned in the show and realize what it is for a community. You know, it's not just their signature, but like everybody at the audience, you know, and we took that poster to like 10 different shows. And it turns out we won. So the PES oil refinery has been shut down, and now Philly Thrive is focused on more action against the environmental racism that's going on. And Anya and I really love using our music to raise up their work, partly because they are just such a great organization. They're super people powered. They go into a community, they say, what do you need? How can we help? They're really relationally focused, and that's really important to us because we are white and we obviously want to be good allies. And, you know, I don't pretend to know what a Black community needs, but as white musicians, we can be fighting against this environmental racism in that way. And they're also using the circles model, which I love, which is that you don't have to be a professional organizer to get involved in some cause like this. You can just, if you're a musician, you're joining the music and arts circle, and you just use your musicianship to raise up what they're fighting for, what we're all fighting for. So it really makes the activism very accessible. And you know, as I was reflecting on the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, I was just thinking, we sort of accidentally wrote this plot about Greta Tunberg, who is the teenage climate activist, and she has done way more than any government has done recently. And we see that we really can't rely on the government to do anything good. So, you know, it's gonna have to be like this. Now we're just gonna all have to be doing grassroots, circle-based work. And we just hope to continue raising up Philly Thrive's message. And I just posted in the chat a petition if you want to learn more about the work they're doing now. So thank you so much to the Schuylkill Center for having us and for acknowledging, you know, the art as activism element in this.
And you can see a little clip from one of the songs from the musical and a couple of just different artifacts at the show.
Great, thank you both. Next up, we have Sophie Tuttle.
Hi. So I wanted to talk about my piece. It's called Solastalgia. And this was actually my thesis for my master's. So I figured I've done a lot of writing on it. So I figured I would just read what I've written. And I wanted to start out with a definition of solastalgia because it is a made up word. So solastalgia is a concept developed to give greater meaning and clarity to environmentally induced distress. As opposed to nostalgia, the melancholia or homesickness experienced by individuals when separated from a loved home. Solastalgia is the distress that is produced by environmental change impacting people while they are directly connected to their home environment. And that's a term coined by the scientist Glenn Albrecht, and he's written a lot on this subject. So if you want to look for his white paper, it's a really interesting read. So I'll just start reading, and I'm not sure how far I'll get in 3 minutes, but I have a timer, so we'll check it out. So Solastalgia is the culmination of my research and personal reflections on the Anthropocene era. During my time investigating what it means to be living in this troubled world, the overarching themes of grief, memory, reverence, and celebration have surfaced again and again. The installation is a memorial to the estimated 150 to 200 species that go extinct every day on Earth. 86% of the species on land and 91% in the ocean have yet to be scientifically identified and named. The memorial commemorates all of the species officially classified in 2018 as extinct, extinct in the wild, or critically endangered in reports from organizations like the IUCN and the BirdLife International. By using this classifying system, I implicate the human hand in the rapid rate of extinction while highlighting the anthropocentric desire to officially record the name and status of a species in order to document and recognize its loss. There are 74 species represented on the wall, leaving 124 blank spaces for the unknown species that never came into contact with the scientific community. The use of natural objects, textbook illustrations, and gridded display structure recall Western anthropogenic impulses to classify, study, and organize the chaos of nature, much like a cabinet of curiosities from the 17th century. And while I wish for this monument to be a vessel for holding grief, I would also like it to be a source of reflection on the causes of the sixth extinction, the global mass die-off of species we are currently witnessing. And I think I'll just stop there.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, we have Julia up next, Julia Way Rix.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, first of all, I want to make an expression of gratitude. I'm really grateful to be a part of this show and to be in conversation with all of the other artists. I'm really glad we're having this event tonight. So thank you to Liz and Tina and Christina and the Schuylkill Center. My project is called For the Future, and it is a collection of 50 cyanotype flags for each of the years, since Earth Day began. And the cyanotype flags have impressions of natural objects among letters and messaging. And when I was putting the project together, I was thinking about the history of the first Earth Day that was very much a part of a counterculture movement. That was manifested by a surge in energy to stop the destruction of industrialization. And it was a teach-in, and several marches have followed in that tradition. And from the beginning, it was a gesture of protest. In my own life, it sort of intersected with that. I attended the March for Science, which was on Earth Day 2017. With my children and my mother, and through attending, witnessing, what it's like at these events, and then also looking at photographs from other events that I've either not been to because they're in other parts of the world, or from history before, maybe I was born by a little bit. That I was really interested in the messaging on the handmade signs that people will bring to these events. Now, some of those messages are, common slogans that you've heard, outside of that event. But I also liked how, some of them are like clever, unique messages. And I collected those messages in these flags. So each one of these 50 flags has something that someone wrote on a sign at a protest. And when I collected these messages, I wanted to pay special attention to, the first place I looked, as I mentioned, were events of, more mainstream environmental movement, events. But I wanted to also intentionally include efforts made by Indigenous communities as well as climate justice efforts to expand the cultural frame from which these messages are coming from. And I, especially, since April, this project has evolved a little bit. With all that's happened over the summer, I did add several more flags to the project to reflect the intersection of climate and racial justice that has been at the forefront of our minds for several months and continues. So the flags are, a few of them, as you saw in the pictures, are inside the gallery, and then if you follow the flags outside the gallery, they will lead you to the Wind Dance Pond Loop, and you can take a hike in the woods at the lovely Schuylkill Center and take it in. And hopefully, yeah, as you go through and think about the messaging, just, have it reflect the efforts of so many people who are looking to, care about the environment and care about the people in it for the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. All right, waterways.
Hey, Waterways is two people. It's myself, Meg Lemieux, and Bree Barton, who's going to speak in a minute. I am an illustrator and an environmental activist here in Philadelphia, and Bree is an artist and educator and also an environmental activist based in South Jersey. Bree, do you want to talk about what Waterways is?
Sure. Thank you all for being here and for the Schuylkill Center for hosting this. Waterways is a collaboratively drawn series of highly detailed pen and ink illustrations telling the story of water and the effects that the national gas industry has on Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and the surrounding areas. Each illustration consists of dozens of small vignettes that highlight the people's struggles with companies and our own government as we struggle to protect the water and the land on which we all survive.
Awesome. So we made Waterways over a period of 9 months in 2017. Bree and I had met in 2016, and we were like, let's jump into this enormous project together very quickly. And it went great. We were both doing environmental justice work within Pennsylvania for years leading up to this, and recognizing a need for overarching educational programming and tools that people could use to explain what the natural gas industry was doing to communities and individuals, the land, the water, and everything that lives here on this earth. I was also a part of the Beehive Design Collective, which is where I learned the process of creating a complex educational piece like Waterways. So throughout the first 6 months of our 9-month adventure of creating Waterways, we traveled around Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and we talked to people also in New York and Delaware who were on the front lines fighting fracking and the natural gas industry in their own places and homes. We interviewed them and gathered their stories, went back to our studios and sketched little vignettes to tell each of their stories. So each one of the vignettes that you see on your screen here, and if you go to the center, you'll see the larger piece. Each one of those vignettes is an individual or community's story and the story of the land and the water. When we went back and we sketched everything, we then sent back the sketches and not just the individual sketches of individual communities, but all the sketches all put together to each person that we interviewed to ask if it made sense to them, if it was accurate, if there was anything we needed to change. We had very few changes, but we did have some, so we went back, did those, then we inked everything and printed it, And now Bree can tell us about how we use this illustration, which is very useful.
So at the Schuylkill Center, you'll see our like 40 by 30 inch illustration, but we also got it blown up to be like a 9-foot banner to use in workshops. So we do a bunch of different workshops with this illustration as our backdrop. But our favorite one is this role play game that we developed where all of the participants at the workshop become residents of a town that has a proposed pipeline slated to run through it. And everyone gets like a bio and an objective based on the characters and in the illustration who are based on real life people. And we act out this very real, very complex drama of conflicting needs and fears and power dynamics, and it's a lot of fun. It's really intense, and if we ever get to be in real life again together, I would love to play with all of you guys.
I think that's it from us.
Great, thank you guys. And last we have Kristen Neville Taylor.
Muted, I'm sorry. Go. Thank you so much to the Schuylkill Center for putting this together and making it happen in spite of everything. It's really uplifting to hear everyone talk about their work. So I'll just talk a little bit about some specific elements and how this piece evolved in the studio. It's called They Never Make a Whole. And with all the uncertainty leading up to the show, I was really glad that I had proposed to make an arrangement because this process for me leaves a lot of room for flexibility. And so it's a way for me to tell a story through objects and images and ask questions without exactly offering answers. It's meant to suggest a kind of ongoingness that things could be taken away or added to as the story grows or changes. And that's really how I like to think about Earth Day and the environmental movement. My goal was to create an overall feeling of nostalgia for the original event in Philadelphia, while also incorporating elements that might trouble the romantic nature of the story. I searched through Temple's urban archives and was drawn to the original photographs from a big Earth Day event in Fairmount Park. And there were these photos by Joseph Tritch for the Philadelphia Evening Bulletin. The originals are color photographs, but at some point in the process, I made the decision that I wanted everything to be black and white. There are a lot of amazing photos, and since I couldn't use them all, I chose 3 of my favorites. One of a daisy in the back pocket of someone's pants, just sort of to acknowledge the symbolism the daisy held for the anti-war and environmental movements at that time. I also really liked one of a young child in a ukulele. You know, the image of a child often was and still is used to express the urgency of the environmental dilemma. And even though this once felt cliche to me, I think being a new mom, it holds a different weight. I also included a photograph of my mother-in-law from 1970, surrounded by daisies. I have a personal collection to the environmental movement through my family. And so I've screen printed her image on the mirror. I wanted to fragment this image to demonstrate the multiple dimensions of something that often is remembered in the public imagination as monolithic, like a family member or Earth Day. And hanging from the mirror is a keychain with instructions for tying a macrame knot, which is a handicraft that was popular at the time, but also the purpose for the arrangement for me is to search for the knots and connections in both a public and personal realm. I also created a glass replica of the original Earth Week cover from the Daily Philadelphian, and I kiln formed it so it would bend over the side of the table in my studio. And I wanted to see how it would work. And so I needed to prop it up under a big book, big enough to support it. And the one that I chose happened to be Walter Benjamin's The Arcades Project. And it ended up making so much sense in the arrangement for the way I was thinking about the history of Earth Day. And so what started as a studio exercise became a part of the final piece. For those that don't know, Benjamin's book is a collection of snippets of thoughts and observations as opposed to something linear with a beginning and end. And that's also where the title, They Never Make a Whole, comes from. So those are just some explanations of some of the component parts in there.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you all. I'm going to turn it over to Tina and we'll have some Q&A.
Thank you, everybody. These were very wonderful presentations, and I'm really glad. And you told us all a little bit more about your practice and what you were thinking when you were making these works. I want to acknowledge that we are missing a duo artist team and an artist from Philadelphia. Tonight they couldn't join us. The duo is actually right now in Europe, and that's why it's a little bit hard for them in the evening event to participate. And so, but I would like to acknowledge their work here. Pili X did our photographs in our exhibition of the Peace Park in Philadelphia. And he is working with the community there, in the community, and really showing us what community work and what environmental justice might mean to us today. And the other one is the duo Tools for Action, and their work is really about the practice of like, what kind of tools could we use to be voiced on the streets when we are demonstrating. And they're showing us in the gallery. We are showing them with a video of their inflatables in New York. But now I would like to start with questions I have here. One immediately for Julia, if I may immediately start over. But please send us more questions if you have. I have also 4 questions prepared that are more general for everyone, but we can figure this out along the way. So, but Julia, would you like to answer the first question that came through our chat from Doris Miller, asking, what was it like installing the flags along the trails during COVID?
Well, yeah, thank you for the question. You know, in the context of COVID, it was very nice to be working outside, I have to say. And also it's nice, I did go and walk through with my children, my sister-in-law and my niece and nephew over the weekend. And it's nice then that it's very accessible and, you know, and yeah, being outside and you can distance, we wore our masks, but when it was just us in certain moments, you can breathe, you know, so that aspect is nice. And it sort of just happened that way, you know, because this exhibition was fully planned before COVID happened. In fact, I happened to be on the grounds of the Schuylkill Center meeting with Liz and talking about a site plan when I got the call from my children's school district that they were closing for the week, you know, so it does seem to, in my experience too, just by chance, be totally connected with that experience. So it's a good question.
Another question that is really related, and I'm wondering if maybe Waterways would like to start answering it. A question came in from Jennifer Nagel-Myers asking, how has COVID changed your experience of the natural world and your art experience?
Wow.
Then yeah, go ahead.
Can you repeat the question real fast?
Yeah, of course. How has COVID changed your experience of the natural world and your art experience in general?
Oh, I feel like that's a good question for everyone on this panel.
Yeah.
I mean, when as Meg and I were approaching March, we had 5 or 6 workshops booked in the spring. And like everyone, we just watched those rapidly vanish. And thankfully Meg and I collaborate on multiple projects, and so we had a long-term project that we were working on together, and so we kind of shifted gears into this other illustration gig that we're still working on. But yeah, that's all I have at the moment. I would love to hear other people's thoughts on this too, though.
Yeah, I was wondering if maybe Nicole is also working outside, working with the plants and creating really in the natural environment. Has that changed your practice?
So I think it's become much, it feels so much more freeing to be outside and working in nature at this particular moment in time. The essentialness of being outside in nature and working with the land and working with the plants feels necessary. If only for the fact that, you know, most of the time it's cooped up indoors, and there are other things happening that are in the studio and that need to happen in the studio because, you know, that space is particularly set up a certain way. But being able to be outdoors and to work outdoors and to just smell the difference in the air, even in the city, the difference of the air quality just because of less traffic since COVID began is noticeable. The color of the sky is noticeable. And all of these things, I feel like there's just been an opening up of taking the time to notice and be aware and present with that. And that's very important.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Does somebody else want to explain or being part of that? Then I have another question that came in through our RSVP, and it came from Dina Liu, one of our trustees actually at the Schuylkill Center. Thank you, Dina. Do you want to ask your question yourself or shall I? Okay. She is asking, and this is also, again, very broadly faced to everybody, so please speak up if you want to answer this question. Does resilience figure into your work? Do you see yourself as a documenter of environmental interactions or as an investigator of process? And if the latter, what tools and questions do you find come up for you when working?
Can you read it one more time?
Of course. Does resilience figure into your work? Do you see yourself as a documenter of environmental interactions or as an investigator of process? And if the latter, what tools and questions do you find come up for you when you're working?
Well, I'll wait, was that directed at somebody in particular? Or?
No, but actually I was wondering if you guys would like to speak about that, because it's really about the resilience you're working with Pili X.
I'll start. I have two different hats that I wear. One is as a science teacher at a private school, and one is as a musician with Ants on a Log. And I'm finding that the work that we can do with ants is similar, but also different from the work I can do as a teacher. And I think with ants, I feel more like a documentarian, like I'm sort of looking around and then seeing what needs to be amplified through song, through stuff that gets stuck in your head. That's the power of music. And as a teacher, I'm looking for ways to get my students involved. And so I don't actually cross those lives that much because, I don't know, conflict of interest. I'm worried about like unplugging myself to my students. I probably shouldn't do that. So I don't actually really do that, but I do work with my students on like environmental justice issues, just learning about various aspects of the science and like why it's important to conserve water and how you can tell that water is polluted and what that means for us. So I don't know if that answers the question, but.
Does somebody else want to speak out about this question? Then I actually would like to move forward. There's another question in our chat from Jerry. Don't know, do you want to speak up yourself, Jerry?
I'm not sure if I have good sound. No, oh,
Okay.
hold on.
We can hear you.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Oh,
You went away.
okay.
All right. My question was just that at this moment, there's so many urgent issues and they're all interconnected, but they also, sometimes it feels like they're competing for attention, for resources, for all of those things. And I was just wondering if anybody has any response to this, how the political climate has changed how you talk about environmental issues. Because I always feel like as an artist who kind of deals with these things that I have to kind of be careful to respect all of the urgent things that are going on simultaneously, if that makes any sense.
Kristen, can I maybe you put you on the spot? I mean, I feel like your work also working with the history of Earth Day might put this question in perspective. Oh, can you unmute yourself?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just starting to say that I don't think I have like I'll have a probably rambling answer, but I think that the privilege of being an artist is that I'm not necessarily competing for like a funding stream within a certain realm, so I can maybe address some issues that where they connect, and I try to do that through stories that I've experienced or that exist in popular culture. But at the same time, I just wouldn't task anyone with addressing all of those things. I think we gotta, especially I think what we're learning or what I'm learning now in COVID and with relentless news cycles, just to take everything one day at a time, one project at a time, and one question at a time.
Can I speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, of course, please.
In the beginning of COVID, I was working with a couple different environmental groups here in Philly, but one of them was 350. And we were working on a lot of stuff, and when the end of May came and George Floyd unfortunately was killed in a really brutal way, we all decided to put a pause on what we were working on and start supporting the folks who were out on the street and the folks who were most affected in the moment. And part of that was because we wanted to not let our agenda kind of like override what was going on in like real time, but part of it was because it is all interconnected. There is such an amount of environmental racism and just injustice in how the world works, especially in the United States right now. And so we wanted to make sure that our boots were on the ground in whatever fashion we were able to do that, so that even within those moments, we could take the time to like draw the connections for other people and be like, yeah, this is terrible. And it's not just like police brutality. It's like all this like wave of other things that like a lot of us who are from European descent haven't experienced like personally a whole lot. And so we were just like, wanting to make sure that we were like not just in a vacuum in our own world, but making sure that we were like we were fighting for the environment by fighting for Black people, because they are so important in the world in general and in all of this. So I think it's just important to draw all those connections when you see it happening.
Thank you for that answer.
Can I add one more thing to that? I just want to give big props to the generation that's coming up right now, because they are doing such a fantastic job of that intersectional work. Like what Meg was saying, like they will not take, you know, it's one or the other for an answer. And I've noticed like every environmental panel or talk or book or anything, you know, that I've seen recently has also definitely included racism. Also, you know, they're so good about gender inclusion. It's just they're like, the work has to be done intersectionally. Like there's no other way to do it, which I just am so grateful for their leading the way in that.
Mike, did you want to speak up?
I would love to just offer a couple of thoughts. One, to pile on what Julie just said. Actually, the first Earth Day had intended to be intersectional, but it kind of got hijacked. The ecology message took precedence, but the original intention was otherwise. Nonetheless, for me, as a teacher of kids since almost the first Earth Day in 1970, I used to be really careful about how I taught children. And I used to worry about what a kid needed to worry about. I didn't think a 5-year-old needed to worry about the rainforest disappearing before a 5-year-old knew what an ant was. But where I am now is I am frankly completely embarrassed by how kids have taken on this issue in a way that adults have not. And it's a remarkable thing to watch that Greta is the tip of an iceberg. There's millions of kids like her. The next generation that's coming up, as you just said, is extraordinary. Adults aren't ready for this. They're just not going to put up with any of it. And it's a remarkable thing to watch. So as an educator, I have to rethink how do I teach? What age do I start teaching about these issues? And then just the other piece of this is nature centers for 50 years have worried about being political. So if you talk about climate change, you might get in trouble. You might lose members, you might lose funders, you might lose corporate sponsors, you might lose your job. So it's been a really interesting thing to watch that many nature centers now realizing that if we don't get political, we're irrelevant. So if a nature center wants to be relevant in the current world, you have to address climate change. And one of the things I've always loved about the art program at the Schuylkill Center is that it's been able to use a different language than educators use. So I really appreciate that. So the art program has always been edgier and more political than our educators have been. So I think our educators are trying to catch up to the you artists. So I want to thank you all for that. But I've been watching a whole shift in both nature centers and education the last few years.
Thank you for these thoughts, Mike. I would like to ask one last question that we received through our RSVP that came from Joy Lai. I'm not sure if she is here. I don't see her in the chat, so I will just ask her a question, which I think is a really beautiful question to like end our conversation. And everybody maybe wants to answer that question or respond to it, but I would like to put you, Sophie, on the spot here at the moment. The question is, what is a new question about the environment that has arisen for you after making your artwork?
That's a really good question. I think for me, as someone who I was born in the 80s and grew up in this like save the rainforest, save the whales kind of environment, I always assumed that it was something that was like a foregone conclusion that we were gonna like wake up and do this thing and like obviously we're gonna do it, right? And after spending 2 years in my master's program and creating this memorial, I guess my question now is more like, what can we do as damage control almost? Or why wasn't that the foregone conclusion that I thought it was? Like, why didn't we make all the changes that I, as an 8-year-old, assumed was the right thing to do, and why didn't we do all that? And what, I guess, what are the implications of that? Like, why is the world so much more complicated than I thought it was as an 8-year-old? So for me, like, a lot of those questions came from when I read Learning to Die in the Anthropocene, and realizing that there's this other kind of, instead of just being this like rosy colored glasses, like forward marching, we're going to change everything, like there's still time. My questions now are more like, how can we do the most amount of good with the situation that we're in now? And that's a super sobering thought, and it's not something I enjoy thinking, but it's kind of, as I reflect on, I mean, I wasn't alive 50 years ago, but as I reflect on 50 years ago and how optimistic people were, or it seems like people were back then, and the situation we're in now, my questions are more kind of sober, unfortunately. Sorry for the pessimistic answer, but those are the like, I'm trying to be more realistic, because I think being realistic is how we will make change now. I don't think there's a lot of point in saying, you know, we can stop everything if we just try hard enough. Like, there's still a lot of really good work that we can do, but I think we need to be more, I need to ask myself more realistic questions.
Can I add to that a little bit?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and this relates to a question that was asked earlier too. When I think about my questions, you know, going forward, and it really is, how do we build resilience in our immediate environment? You know, yes, I grew up with feelings of idealism about the rainforest too, you know, and that's, you know, that's one thing. But what really, I think, makes a lot of traction with boots on the ground is really thinking about how we build resilience. And I don't know the answers, but yeah, that's one thing that I personally, you know, have a quest to investigate.
I would add to that also. I've been struggling with the idea of kind of like when An Inconvenient Truth came out and the message was change your light bulbs, and a lot of people were upset that that was kind of like the main takeaway from that movie, was that individual people had to make this small change and it would add up, which it will. But I'm struggling with, like, it's not the individual person's fault. There are these huge companies and huge corporations and people in Congress and presidency that, like, that unless they're changed, what are we going to do? So I'm struggling. That's definitely a question for me. Like, I can sing all the songs about conserving water until the cows come home, but unless the person in Congress who's going to make the decision does something, I don't really know what it's going to do. So I'm like having a little bit of an existential crisis, and maybe from a teacher's perspective, I'm trying to teach my students. They're pretty young, but the oldest I have is 4th grade. And they can get the concept of, like, writing to politicians and stuff. But that's kind of, I struggle with that right now.
I would second that, if I can jump on. And, you know, I think it really requires as much personal action as it requires collective action. We have personal responsibility to just buy less stuff, like avoid plastic, really just try to get to what is essential in life. And I think right now, because we are moving slowly, because of this pandemic, we're doing less, we're traveling less, you know, we're sort of figuring out what is essential to our daily life. And it's important to know that, and it's important to know what we can go without. We have a luxurious lifestyle in this country. There are places where there isn't running water. We can take 45-minute showers, you know? So I think the question that arises for me is, how do we build personal action into collective action? And how do we create more essential living that is more locally based, so that everything, you know, we don't need to travel that far. The things that are essential to our living also don't need to travel that far. And if we can find answers to those intersections, I think that's going to help everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for these wonderful thoughts. I think like there were a couple of really great ideas about like how we can like move forward, and maybe it's like just the balance you were all talking about, like on the one hand the damage control, but also on the other hand really like our personal actions, like let's do something good in this moment and wish for the ideal, but be realistic about what we can actually do in our lives and what we could change. But what we also heard about, like, let's be inspired by the young ones around us and the youth that is really pushing forward to something that we maybe don't understand or are too slow already to understand and being more grateful about. So with these words, I would love to like say thank you to everyone for being here tonight and joining us. Thank you for the artists to participate in the exhibition. It is a real pleasure to have you and to show your work. I think it's amazing, and I really hope that everybody can come to the Schuylkill Center and see the show and go on our trails and enjoy nature and be out there and take action. And thank you for the organizers, Christina and Liz, amazing work. So move forward, wonderful. And thanks to our funders, the Joseph Roberts Foundation, who really supported us with this exhibition. With them, it wouldn't be possible to show this. And please stay in touch. We will post this video on our YouTube channel. You can share it. You can also rewatch it if you like. And have a wonderful evening and good night to everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Nice to meet everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Mhm.